quite certain of flying colors.
Or line London.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Let's start let's call the meeting to order, the Planning Commission, 4 o'clock, Wednesday, June 14th. I'd like to start by seeing if there are any additions or changes to the agenda or minutes. None? Okay. I'd like a motion to accept the minutes as is.
So moved.
I'll second it.
And a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. I would like a motion to accept the minutes as is. Can I have a motion?
I'll motion to accept.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, those all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Okay, so let's start out with, if Neva, you would like to talk about 250 Bloomquist Mountain Road?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
This is a conditional use permit request to build a 4,500 square foot accessory structure / garage on parcel ID 55-231-2275. The property is 11.22 acres. It's zoned within the FAR 3 zone district. Within this zone district, conditional uses this is listed as a conditional use specifically under item 11, and the property is non-shoreland. The applicants would like to request to build this structure to store equipment and semi-trucks. The property is generally undeveloped. There's a storage shed on the property, and the land is used to place heavy equipment. I have a map of the northerly portion of the property on the bottom of page 1 of the staff narrative. For zoning considerations, this property is located in non-shoreland area of the FAR 3 zone district, which the principal purpose is to provide for permanent and seasonal areas at a medium density. Farming and other rural activities are also allowed. Accessory structures that are less than 3,000 square feet are permitted with a regular land use permit in this zone district, and then accessory structures over 3,000 square feet are the ones that require the conditional use permit. I did include some language for the east end desired future conditions in the staff narrative from the land use guide plan. I did also include on page 3 the general requirements for conditional uses listed out in section 10.05 of the Cook County zoning ordinance. The proposed use should not have negative impacts. I'm sorry, I did miss the word not. So that's important. That's an important word. Should not have negative impacts on septic, wetlands, impervious surface coverage, nor neighboring properties. My apologies, Mr. Bloomquist. This application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on May 19th. 25 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners as well as county departments. I did not receive any written comments during the public written comment period. I will say that I did receive one late comment letter. It was supportive, but it's not technically in the record, so nothing for you to be concerned about with that. For staff recommendations for consideration, the proposed structure appears to be non-problematic with the surrounding land use patterns and zoning. Noise and external lighting could be potential items for discussion should the Planning Commission wish to. And that is all that I have, and then I included the application.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Maxwell. So let's see, would the applicant like to speak?
I need to.
You don't need to, but if you'd like to.
Just looking for a garage we can fix equipment in.
Okay, is there anybody in support that would like to speak?
No.
Anybody? No? Anybody in opposition? Okay, well, I will close public hearing, and then we will discuss. Does anybody have any comments? Anybody would like to have any concerns, or?
You know, just being out there, I think it's pretty necessary for him to put up a shed like that,
Okay.
seeing the situation.
Do we have any external lighting issues, or concerns, or noise?
I too visited the site, and, an opportunity to store some of his equipment and so forth, I think is going to be a distinct benefit to the area, although there were many other people with quite a bit of equipment and things that were parked in yards and so forth, so I see it as a net improvement to tidy up.
Okay. Anybody else? Have any comments?
Yeah, I went and did a visit as well. I would agree. I think having things stowed is only a benefit. I guess I would ask just a clarifying question about external lighting, if you have any plans for lighting that building, or?
Oh, there probably one little garage light outside the
Sure.
main garage door, but other than that.
Great.
Okay, so unless there are any other comments, I would like to hear a motion to accept the application as per staff recommendations, and also changing, make sure we put a not in there for the proposed use should not have negative impacts on septic, et cetera.
Motion to approve.
Okay, can we have a second?
I'll second.
Let's see, so all in favors?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You're all set.
Thank you very much.
If I may, Madam
Oh,
Chair?
I'm sorry.
Just one real quick note. So this is a recommendation to the County Board of Commissioners to recommend approval. So this will go before the County Board of Commissioners at their next meeting, which I believe is
2 weeks from.
2 weeks from now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
Thank you. Good
We
clarification.
gotta wait another 2 weeks.
Just a clarification on that, yes. Sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, 392 County Road 60. Ms. Maxwell, would you like to give us the background?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application brought forward by Tamara Krause on the Carol Berglund property. It's a request for a renewal of an interim use permit for a seasonal event venue / wedding barn within the FAR 3 zone district at 392 County Road 60. The property is within shoreland area of Woods Creek. The applicant's property includes 240 acres with over 3,000 feet of shoreline to Woods Creek. The parcel is contained entirely within the FAR 3 zone district. The proposed use is not a listed permitted use in this zone district, and Woods Creek is classified as a designated trout stream. This application is a renewal of the 1-year interim use permit, which was issued in 2022 for the seasonal wedding venue / wedding barn at 392 County Road 60. Property owner Carol Berglund and her daughter Tamara Krause would like to have been making improvements to modify the existing barn and agricultural area to accommodate seasonal wedding venues from June to September. Ms. Berglund lives on site. The 240-acre property is located on County Road 60 in a rural agricultural area of the county. The nearby landscape is characterized by forest and agricultural areas. The nearest dwelling is over 1,000 feet from the barn. This distance is similar to the required 1,000-foot buffer between dog kennels and nearby neighbors to provide for an adequate sound buffer. Parking area is proposed in the field and driveway area. The applicant is anticipating approximately 50 to 100 vehicles during events. County Road 60 is an unpaved county road. Events are proposed to be hosted seasonally from June through September as weather permits. Music will be in the loft area of the barn, alcohol will be served, and food will be catered in with a kitchenette area for a refrigerator and oven, with no cooking on site. According to Minnesota Department of Health, an MDH food license will be required if there are any dishes being done on site or food being prepared on site. If everything is being catered in, then an MDH food license is not required. The applicant proposes all events to end at 10 p.m. with the barn emptied out by 11 p.m. The barn does not have plumbing at this time. The applicant is proposing to have a portable outhouses rented on site until improvements have been made. Future plans include adding a septic system, pressurized plumbing, and restrooms to the barn to make the facility more functional. The scope of this project, which is I'm referring to as occupancy, is the important consideration when considering state permitting may be required. The Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry defines a place of public accommodation as follows: a publicly or privately owned facility with an occupant load of 100 or more people and is a sports or entertainment arena, stadium, theater, community or convention hall, special event center, indoor amusement facility, water park, or indoor swimming pool. Cook County has not adopted the building code and has no local enforcement. With no local code enforcement, the Construction Codes and Licensing Division of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry has jurisdiction for projects with an occupant load over 100 persons. There are a number of requirements associated with a state review, one of which is that portable toilets are not acceptable per state requirements. This suggests that the IUP will need to be conditioned for less than 100 occupants until that improvement's been made. And then I also included a fact sheet on that state definition of places of public accommodation. The original 2022 request was modified through the approval process for an interim approval with a lower occupancy limit after more information was received regarding the Minnesota State Building Code requirements. The Planning Commission in 2022 had heard from 3 neighbors with concerns related to the request. The conditions were set to mitigate the potential impacts of the activity with a 1-year interim approval. The Planning Commission unanimously approved recommending approval of the interim use permit modified with conditions. The interim approval is seen as by the applicant and the Planning Commission as a trial period. Should the operation go well, she will reapply for the conditional use permit with a potentially larger occupancy limit and the property meeting the Minnesota State Department of Labor and Industry standards for places of public accommodation. There were 12 conditions that were placed on that 22 interim use permit. I think I'm not going to read all 12. For zoning considerations, I did include some details about the FAR 3 zone district and just the fact of this kind of falling under that catch-all other statement for what falls under needing a conditional use permit. Under the land use guide plan, there's some guiding principles about commercial services being offered in the county, so I included that language. For site conditions and considerations, the septic one probably could use a little discussion. Mitch Everson, the Cook County Environmental Health Officer, has reviewed this renewal interim use permit, and he provided a memo stating that the event held in 2022 didn't provide the site and service agreement for the porta potties, so that would be something just to make sure that that's kind of refreshed on. There are some wetlands, so that's mostly a topic if there's any grading, filling activities for improving the parking area. The map for the wetlands is on the top of page 6. Noise was a subject of discussion during the 2022 public hearing. Quiet hours were set by 10 p.m. for music, and the venue closing at 11. There was no condition to the music being located inside or outside. Exterior lighting should be downcast and shielded. There is safe parking and access off County Road 60. We publicly noticed this on May 19th. 10 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. I did not receive any written comments during this public written comment period. And then Mitch Everson did provide details about his comments on the septic as I just referenced. So essentially this application is asking for a renewal of that 1-year interim approval. There's nothing substantially different in this request than what was in the 2022 request. So I recommend that we discuss, those conditions, make sure that they're still okay with the applicant. My understanding is in 2022, one event was held. So this is, there's not a whole lot of trial period that was experienced in that 1-year approval. And, I think the lack of neighbors showing up is quite different than 2022. So that's a good sign that it probably hasn't caused any issues.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Maxwell. Mm-hmm. Would the applicant like to speak?
It was a beautiful wedding.
Would you, if you'd like to, please step up here, state your name for the,
Just a minute.
okay, yep, take your time. Please state your name and address, and then go ahead and share with us.
I am Tamara Krause from Hibbing, but the venue is here in town in Grand Marais at my folks' farm.
Okay.
I did a lot to this barn the last 5-6 years. We straightened it, roofed it, put new windows in it, insulation, flooring in the loft is all done. Now we're working on electricity and the front and the back deck with stairways to go down so we have access for upstairs. And we do have a new stairway in the barn to go upstairs. We're putting a covered porch, 12 by 60 on the east side, which follows the field. And porta potties, when we did this wedding last year, was out on the west field. That's where the 40 by 80 tent was put, and that's where all the cars were parked. And it was not crowded at all, and it worked beautifully. And I think I might just use that for parking up there in that field. What else can I say?
Would you like to share any concerns about how things went? Are you still?
I sat there on the porch the whole time and didn't do a thing. It was wonderful.
Okay.
They brought in the tent, they catered it, and they dismantled it the next day, so it worked out wonderful. We were done by 10 o'clock. I could hear the music had stopped, and I looked out at 11. It was so black out there, everybody had gone already, because they were there early in the afternoon, and I think it was fine. It worked.
Okay, so you're in agreement with all of the 12 conditions?
I believe so.
That happened last year?
Yeah,
and
I
now
want the 10
moving
o'clock and the 11 o'clock, and right now we're doing the porta potties till I can get I just wanted to talk to the plumber down here, the new guy, and see if we can talk about bathrooms upstairs and a downstairs bathroom. And then I have to talk about well water and see where we need to place that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Do you
Yeah.
have anything in closing?
No.
All right. Is there anyone in here in support? Anyone in opposition? Okay, public comment is closed, and we'll discuss. What would everybody like to
We
share?
kind of went over this last year. I guess I did, I'm not sure, but I'm okay with it, with all the stipulations as stated. It was okay with us last time, so.
Yes.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to state that I was here last year as well, and this was just a great example of Cook County residents working together to make something happen. There were concerns about noise, about lighting, cars on the road, all of that, and everybody made it work. And I just want to thank you and all the neighbors out there for taking the initiative to collaborate and come up with a solution. And it sounds like, at least for this first year, one event, things went really well.
Yeah, that was real good. I was very surprised. Yeah, they said it was so beautiful. They were walking up the hill, looking down. It's scenery, real pretty scenery. We don't have a lake, but we do have fields that are beautiful.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Anyone else?
Yeah, I too would like to just, I guess, laud the effort to breathe new life into a building like that and use the space in a creative manner. I think that is consistent with what I read in the vision plan for the county as well, how we use our space here. And also and acknowledge the difficulties in having this interim use permit in front of you, and just hearing what you're saying, that there's years of work leading up to this. And I think we have this one event sample size. I think it's appropriate to give another year of interim use to get more events under our belt. But you're experimenting, you're trying something, and so it's difficult to run the full sample basically with 1 year green light. So I think I'm happy to give it a second year.
Okay.
A question, there was a condition about having a service agreement that was not met this last year.
Yeah, I think so Mitch Everson needs a signed service agreement for the porta potties when they're brought on site for each wedding event. So I think that's just some paperwork that got missed. You had the porta potties out there.
I did, and we had them in that field behind the house.
Yep, so Mitch just needs that paperwork completed before the next wedding happens.
And I'll talk to you all.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
This barn, I have to say, it's 100 years old come next year. My dad was born 1924, and that's when it was built by his grandfather.
Sure to get your century certificate.
Yes, I might have to, historical.
Okay.
Ken?
Any
wife's got
further
one in her
discussion?
family.
Any further discussion? Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion to approve this application per the staff recommendations, all 12 points, and highlighting the signed service agreement. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And that will also be before the County Board of Commissioners at that late June meeting.
June 22nd,
June 22nd, okay.
a Tuesday.
Dr. there?
My coworker Joseph will represent it. You don't need to be there.
Oh, thank God. I might be around anyway, but that's all right.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
is there anything further to discuss? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, we have one more item.
Up.
It's small.
Oh, I am And so I would like to see if there are any changes or additions to the minutes or the agenda. Nothing? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to accept the agenda as is.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
I have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I'd like, let's see, a motion to accept the minutes as is.
Make a motion to accept the
Second.
minutes as is.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, so let's start with new business. So, Ms. Maxwell, would you like to give us some information about 210 Peninsula Point Trail?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I believe our applicant is on the phone line. Mike, are you there? All right, we're just about to begin your application, so I'm gonna get started on reading through the narrative, so hold on tight.
Thank you.
All right, so this is a variance request for relief from the Cook County zoning ordinance to place an accessory structure and unsited woodshed at a reduced ordinary high water level shoreline setback of 25 feet from Caribou Lake, which is classified as a recreational development lake, where a minimum of 100 feet is required, located at 210 Peninsula Point Trail, Lutzen. The property is 0.81 deeded acres with approximately 290 feet of Caribou Lake shoreline. The parcel is contained entirely within the Lakeshore Residential Zone District. In that zone district, conforming new parcels must be 1 acre in size and 150 feet wide at the structure setback. The applicant would like to get relief from the shoreline setback requirements, essentially to place a 3-sided woodshed attached to the back side of the garage. The woodshed would encroach 75 feet on the 100-foot lake setback and be sized 8 feet by 20 feet and be 25 feet at the closest point from the lake shore and located within the shore impact zone. The applicant lives at the property. Currently, the wood is stacked for drying in a location closer to the lake between the garage and the lake. This property did receive a variance in 2020 for relief from the shoreline and road setback to modify an existing structure. The parcel is located on a particularly narrow section of a peninsula on Caribou Lake. The immediate Peninsula Point landscape includes a number of conforming and non-conforming structures and parcels. Geology of the point and the small size of the historic state-platted lots has meant most new construction along Peninsula Point corridor requires variance relief. 4 out of 5 of the immediately adjacent neighboring properties have received variance approvals from the shoreline and/or road setbacks on this narrow area of the peninsula. I did include a summary of other properties nearby that have received variance relief recently. Or just in history, actually, because it goes back to 1986 and 1980. On the bottom of page 4 is a picture of the backside of the garage looking towards Caribou Lake where that new woodshed would be placed. And you can see a little bit of that currently piled wood further back. There should be no impact to septic for this woodshed. Minimal increase in impervious surface. Some of that area already is hardscaped. No impacts to wetlands. For slope, the garage site is already graded with flat space on the backside where this shed would go. Drainage from this addition will flow towards Caribou Lake. So that's where that being within the shore impact zone part of things is important to consider. I did include a map showing Peninsula Point Peninsula there. This was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on May 19th. We sent out 28 letters of notification to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments, Minnesota DNR hydrologists, and the Cook County Coalition of Lake Associations. I did not receive any written comments during the written comment period. I did receive 1 late comment from the Lake Association, so that's not included because it's after the comment deadline. I did invite them to come in person if they wanted to share those comments in person. Danny Brow, the new Minnesota DNR area hydrologist, provided the following comments on this variance request. And a quote, "I have found this variance request to be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the Shoreland Ordinance and is consistent with the comprehensive plan because this accessory structure will be built on an existing deck and would not increase the amount of impervious surface on the lot. The structure would likely not contribute to additional sediment and nutrient loading into the water body. The structure may minimize runoff of pollutants and debris into the lake. There are unique circumstances to this property. Granting the variance would allow the essential character to stay the same. I recommend approving this variance request." For zoning staff recommendations for consideration, I believe this request appears to be non-problematic. The existing vegetative buffers should be maintained to continue to provide visual screening and stormwater runoff filtration. I make that point to say that I would view this request much differently if all these trees were gone and this was just turf grass going down to the lake. So it is an important aspect to consider. So therefore, with that in mind, the following conditions may be attached to this variance request. Number 1, the vegetative buffer shall be maintained between the woodshed and the lake. And number 2, no components of the woodshed shall be closer than 25 feet from the ordinary high water level of Caribou Lake. And with that, I'll just remind you, Madam Chair, that the applicant is on the phone line present today.
Okay, so would the applicant like to speak?
Mike, would you like to speak?
Yeah, briefly. Well, first of all, thank you. I don't want to discount the importance of this process. It's very important. But in one respect, I'm really just adding a, kind of shed roof to protect the wood on the back end of my garage, as has been described and articulated. And then just quickly, number 2, my wife and I have been a residents of that property for almost 35 years. And I think if there were any visits to the area, I have always found, I'm kind of a neat freak, so my yard is always well taken care of, the property's taken care of, and I don't have a lot of loose debris laying around. So this is just going to tidy it up a little bit more. And I appreciate you giving this thoughtful consideration.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there anyone from the public who is here in support? Anyone in opposition? If not, I will close to public comment and we will discuss. Does anyone have any comments? It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, it is. I did a site visit. Makes perfect sense.
Okay, well, I'd like to entertain a motion then to accept the staff recommendations, number 1 and 2, as is, and approve the application. Does anyone have a motion?
So moved.
I'd like a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you for all your work. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
All right, let's see, on to the second.
You're the only person in this meeting.
Done.
Okay, Ms. Maxwell, would you like to tell us about 71 Boulder Boulevard, please?
You betcha, Madam Chair. This application is presented by Matthew and Tina Ketcher, and their agent present today is Larry Bowen. The variance request is for relief from sections 4.08C and 7.05 of the zoning ordinance to place a principal structure at a reduced road setback, 28 feet from center line, where a minimum of 50 feet is required, and at a reduced ordinary high water level shoreline setback of 60 feet from Tom Lake, which is classified as a recreational development lake, where a minimum of 100 feet is required, located at 71 Boulder Boulevard on Tom Lake. The applicant's property includes 0.87 acres with approximately 209 feet of Tom Lake shoreline. My apologies. The parcel is contained entirely within Lakeshore Residential Zone District. Newly created lots must be 1 acre and 150 feet wide at the structure setback, and Tom Lake is classified as recreational development. The applicants are requesting relief from the shoreline setback requirements of Tom Lake and the road setback of Boulder Boulevard to place a 38 by 46 cabin on the property. The structure would encroach 40 feet on the 100-foot lake setback and 22 feet on the 50-foot road setback. The mound septic system will also be installed on the east side of the property across the road. The parcel is generally undeveloped. Historic use indicates it's been primarily used as a recreational parcel with an RV on it. There is a shed currently on the property and a privy which will need to be inspected if it's to be maintained. Development plans have a septic system designed and permitted. It hasn't been permitted yet. Our septic contractor did go out on site, for the septic to be on the east side of the property. Mitch Everson did confirm that the septic components won't require variance relief. There are no issues with impervious surface coverage nor wetlands, nor slope. The drainage will be directed towards Tom Lake, so it is important that the riparian vegetation be maintained. For shoreline vegetation, currently a good quality shoreline buffer does exist on this parcel with a clearing for a picnic area, water access, and viewing corridor. No further removal of shoreline vegetation shall be permitted, and the shoreline buffer should be maintained with new plantings over time to continue the benefits of screening and stormwater management. And then I indicated the shoreline alterations section of the zoning ordinance in there as well. The Cook County zoning ordinance does include some criteria for what we call shoreline setback averaging. The long story short about those calculations on the bottom of page 5 is that those calculations for this site don't come to bear shoreline setback relief as proposed. Essentially, the development on either side is either set back further or there's no development, which then defaults to the 100-foot conforming setback. With that said, the road is the reason that this structure is needing to be closer to the lake. So kind of asterisk by that calculation. The application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on May 19th. 26 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners as well as county departments, DNR hydrologists, and the Cook County Coalition of Lake Associations. No comments from adjacent property owners were received during the written comment period. Danny Browd, the DNR area hydrologist, provided comments on this variance request, which are as follows. She says, I have found this variance request to not be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the shoreland ordinance and not consistent with the comprehensive plan due to proposed structure not meeting setback requirements for either lake or road. The encroachment that this structure may impose could contribute to nutrient and sediment loading in Tom Lake and is not consistent with the implementation and enforcement of the shoreline management standards. Although there are unique circumstances to this property, I recommend to not approve this variance request. It is known that building a structure on this lot will not meet minimum setback requirements from any location on this lot. Mitigation measures I would suggest are maintaining as much vegetation as possible with minimal tree and buffer vegetation removal. During construction, I would recommend the use of BMPs such as fiber rolls, silt fence, etc. in all areas that could cause discharge into the lake and fully stabilize the area before allowing BMP removal. For zoning staff recommendations for consideration, the placement of Boulder Boulevard has limited the conforming building locations on this property. Note that the location on Boulder Boulevard identified on the applicant's site sketch is inaccurately depicted on the eastern side of the property. There may be a location on the western side of the parcel that could meet the shoreline setback. However, it would not be large enough to also meet the road setback. A survey would likely be needed to ensure conformity on such a precise location. The size of the proposed structure could be discussed and potentially adjusted. The structure with a smaller footprint would require less encroachment and variance relief. With proper shoreline vegetation and stormwater management, this development should have minimal impacts on the shared resource of Tom Lake. One other alternative could be considered as relocating Boulder Boulevard, which would be the only way to meet the lake setback. If approved, the following conditions may be attached to this request. The property shall conform with Minnesota Rule 7080 and the Cook County septic requirements. No vegetation shall be removed from the shore impact zone. No component of the proposed structure may be closer than 50 or 60 feet from the ordinary high water level of Tom Lake. A gutter or catchment system or vegetation conducive to water retention shall be included on all or proposed structures to divert precipitation and snowmelt away from Tom Lake. And impervious surface shall not exceed 25%. Prior to permitting, the landowner shall demonstrate the property's impervious surface coverage calculations, which shall include all road, parking areas, buildings, and other improvements. And the cabin shall be earth-toned or neutral in color.
Okay, would the applicant's agent like to speak?
I'm good.
Okay, is there anybody in opposition from the public? Anybody in support? All right, I'll close public hearing and we will discuss. I do have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Have they, to help with the setbacks, have they considered building up to get at their square footage, but at a much smaller footprint?
This is the plan that he had for this lot. I haven't really asked him, I suppose he would. You know, get down too small and it's not practical, you know, especially when you got older people.
Oh, sure, sure.
Staircases and stuff like that. I could move to the west a little bit and fudge it up a little bit more, but the roads really is the part that's messing everything up. You tell me what you want me to do.
And I have a question for you. Wouldn't moving the road, would that affect the septic?
It would, yeah, the east side where they're across the road is where they're kind of planning on the septic. Our staff member just went out there last week. So everything's kind of conceptual at this point. So But yeah, placing the road where the current, or placing the septic where the current road is would also be a problem.
And it's a hardship for the client too, spending all that money to move the road. Wow.
Well,
It's a tough lot in the first place.
Sure.
And the concern, since I drove the whole thing, and I was creeping over those rocks, for the recommendation. You know, it drives right through the properties, all the ones adjacent to it, so it's not a move without implication to all of the neighboring properties to move that road back. I'm sure that this is approved and there is a building going in there. The builder's gonna have to send a bulldozer down that road anyways and widen it out and flatten it and get some things working, so they could at least get trucks in there, because there's gonna be some implications and costs of that as it is.
well, I mean, I drove it also. And
Okay.
that's my neighborhood up there.
Oh,
And to me, it's a lake property, and I see, there are all kinds of similar things like this with lake properties. There's always something unusual and something you have to work around, and I didn't, I mean, yes, there are concerns, but I didn't see, I would support it.
yeah, from the
Based on what I
character of the
saw.
lake, the home's placement relative to how the other places had been built on the lake seemed in keeping, you know, there's a lot of cabins visible from the shore.
Right, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it does, one thing that I bear in mind, I guess, after that presentation we just had from Jason is that, I want to tread lightly on the word, but in terms of precedent, when you have to do a calculation on setbacks we've issued, it does sort of allow you to move everything closer to the lake, to put something, you know, that close. My moving the road seems impractical. Ideal, I think, obviously the issue is where the road is, but it sort of chafes me that becomes the responsibility of the property owner to deal with. But the size of the building, I think, is one thing that feels inconsistent to me based on some of the other stuff up on Tom Lake, on Boulder in particular, that a lot of those cabins are much smaller, I would say. You know, a lot of them are off-grid and
And
small
they're
structures.
1.5 story, there was an A-frame.
Yeah. So that's something that I see. I'd like it to be smaller and encroach less if I was going to pick one of these conditions to pursue, or suggestions rather, that Eva has made.
That's roof overhang too. That's not
Sure.
structure itself, it's roof overhang.
And what's the overhang? Is it 2 feet?
2 feet.
Is there a porch or anything like that going on as well?
Pardon me?
Is there a porch or anything like that going on as well?
Front and back,
Front and back porches.
that's included. So the house proper is not very big.
And where, I noticed there was a camper there. Is that right in the footprint of where they want the?
Pretty close.
Do you have concerns about the size?
I don't, I'm considering what was recommended, you know, so that, and just thinking about it, right? Because, just having built and retiring at the same time, I made it a point myself to put everything on the main floor.
Sure.
And it's
That's
coming
understandable.
true now that my wife has a broken leg.
Sure. Yep,
How
that's
important it was to do
understandable.
that.
Do we need any more discussion? Can anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I can live with it, I think, you know, it's 60 feet isn't right smack on the lake, but I do think, for the record, that it impacts going forward the development of Tom Lake, and we should bear that in mind.
One of the things that they did at Caribou when they sold the state lots was I don't know who they went to, but they went to somebody and said, give these people some land on the other side of the road, because every lot in those state lots didn't meet any of our requirements. And it was impossible to meet the requirements. And so I know that they were all offered an opportunity to get greater depth to their property. on the other side of the road, so a lot of them moved their septic systems back there.
Mhm.
And existing facilities that are kind of grandfathered in on that, to where cabins had been already built. It might be a longer-term thing for the folks up in this area, that could, something like that could be accommodated, but I don't know that it makes a difference, and it doesn't move the road today, so I know that.
Mhm. Just out of curiosity, I guess, a point of clarification. The lot is smaller than the minimum lot size, correct? So, I mean, we're already dealing with
Yeah, this one's outside the lines, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Yes, Tim?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will say that that's a good point in terms of the, the land. That's not the only lake that's been done on. When other areas have been sold, that consideration has been given to property across the road, just because of the way that the lots are intersected by some of those roads. And to address your point, this technically does not set a precedence. Every request does have to be taken in and of itself. So we're dealing with a substandard size lot and a placement here. Other requests, maybe facing different geographic issues and such like that. So we can't put too much emphasis in terms of, a precedence that's going to be set. Of course, from a sociological standpoint, there's always that thought, well, you're letting them do it, so you gotta let me do it, kind of thing. But that's not illegal.
Right, and specifically, I guess I'm looking at the sort of the math that NEVA did in this application to demonstrate, what the surrounding setbacks are, and if that would influence our decision making.
Well, and the
Correct.
DNR actually has kind of their own standard, and this standard is a little bit more restrictive than that, because they have a string test. They go to where the next sets of development are, and there's the string test, and you can build up to where that string line is.
Uh-huh.
We have it set in our calculations that if there's no development there, you have to automatically
Sure.
calculate those at the appropriate setback. So that calculation is more restrictive than the DNR shoreline areas allow.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. One thing I didn't notice in the staff recommendations, and maybe I'm overlooking it, there was nothing about shall be no closer than 28 feet to Boulder Boulevard?
That should probably be
That should be there?
That should be a statement. Those conditions on there really help define what you're approving. It helps us as staff, after you guys do an approval, when we're working with the landowner, if there's any kinds of modification or anything, that's kind of our hard line, if that's what the intent of the approval was, so that we know and we can follow through with what your approval is. So,
Okay.
it is a really good point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And what does everybody think about this? Now, that Boulder Road is, I mean, you could call it a road. It's very narrow and windy, and it's in the middle of nowhere. How about moving it closer to the road and away from the lake?
I'd
Further
rather
away.
encroach on the road than the lake.
And-
Absolutely.
And
I would agree.
reasonably, how close to the road is the question. I mean, people are not going to be going fast down this road by any stretch, ever.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'm curious if Mr. Bowen has more details. When you mentioned the decks, or the decks on either side, that sounds to me like kind of a low-hanging fruit. If you're kind of grappling with the square footage and these different setbacks, maybe there's a compromise point to be had there, that you can have your structure, but maybe this isn't a structure with several decks. So I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe there's some dimensions if you're thinking that line of thinking.
Yeah, that's the one thing that is kind of missing, is just sort of the depiction of the building, even just a artist rendering kind of a thing.
And that does include the decks, the 60 feet. It includes any decks.
That's for the deck, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
And if I may, Madam Chair, the options available to you too is if you feel like you need more information to make a decision, you could always ask that the applicant bring that information to you. So there is the option. We try to process these in timely fashions, but if you're thinking that a floor plan would really help you understand how much of the square footage is really the structure, how much of this is the decks, you could ask that they come to the table with that information before you feel comfortable making an approval.
Oh, maybe we could just ask right now.
They don't want to get into the design and development of the building unless we can
Approve
get
something.
going.
Sure.
You know.
Well, I'd like to go back and discuss pushing it farther away from the lake. So how close can we reasonably bring it to the road
Mhm.
and keep it away from the lake? Can we,
Need to have parking too on that side, so, you know, time you get 28 feet to the center line, and then you come out to the edge of the road, you don't have much for parking there.
could they come around the side and park to the side?
You could.
I'm-
That's not part of the design, I guess, or so far anyway.
Mhm.
Sure, sure.
You know, you're
I mean, I don't have.
limiting the architectural aspect of it.
Sure. I personally, I don't have an issue with the 60 and the 28. I mean, it'd be nice to push it farther from the lake, but I can live with that.
Yeah,
What's
if they're gonna
everybody else
park on
think?
that side, they need the 28, because that's
Right.
your average vehicle, like, gonna be 2 feet, it's 20 foot in length, they're gonna have 4 feet space between there and the road as somebody drives past it.
Sure.
Mhm.
Okay, do we need any more discussion? Or can we entertain a motion to accept the applicant's request with 1 through 6 plus 7, which indicates that the structure shall be no closer than 28 feet to Boulder Boulevard?
So move to approve?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And unless there's anything further, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn?
In a second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carries adjournment. Okay.
Nice enough.
Gosh.